5 things I wish I knew when I got pregnant. This week on Chronicles of a Female Engineer, I discussed things that I wish I knew before I got pregnant, particularly working in a male-dominated industry as an engineer. The first one was around when to tell my boss. So typically the advice medically is around make sure that you inform people at after the 12-week mark. And this is because this is the high risk period where you may undergo a miscarriage. So this is a time when essentially you want to be informing people after that. But while you're at work, you may need to tell your boss before that. And this can be due to a number of scenarios. So perhaps you're working in a role which requires excess travel, and you may be going to towns where there's specific vaccinations that may be required, and they may interfere with your pregnancy. So you need to be in a position to speak to your doctor and understand what those implications are. And if it calls for it, discuss that with your boss. Another example is your work environment. So I remember I was working in the solvent extraction area at one of my plants, and that typically has a high solvent reagents. Some of the reagents essentially that you use and the chemicals that you're exposed to in that area are not good for fertility. So those type of areas you'd want to be in a position to let your boss know as soon as possible so that you can provide the best scenario as possible. The second thing is around confidentiality. So I'm not sure about your workplaces, but often in small towns and remote locations or in these industries in general, I think any workplace, gossip is rife. Rumors are rich and people love a story. So if you want to tell people in confidence, let them know that, hey, look, I'm just telling you this in confidence. I haven't told anyone yet, and I'm waiting for this to happen. I am pregnant. I'm only this many weeks, or whatever that may be. And this way, at least you set that expectation that this is not news that is ready for being shared at the time. If you don't mind it being shared, I was one of the people who didn't mind it being shared. And so I was happy to let them know that I am comfortable with people being aware of this at this point. Okay, so just be aware of that. I've heard many females sadly feel a bit bypassed, or they weren't aware, and they've approached their boss, and their boss actually already knows because they've heard it on the grapevine. So that's not a scenario that you want to be reinforcing. The third one is around knowing that life is great when you're pregnant compared to when you've got the baby. So what I mean by that is that when I was pregnant, I found that, there was lots of perks in the workplace. People would pull out a chair for me if there were limited numbers of chairs, perhaps in a meeting. I didn't have to go up 7 flights of stairs to go and do analysis at the reformer or the furnace that was on my site at the time. So those are the sort of perks that you have when you're pregnant. You can adjust your work duties to suit your needs as you get further along your trimesters. So what's important though is that after your baby has born, you do now have to do a lot more planning, a lot more management, and a lot more supervision. You have to be parenting, right? And it seems like basic, but it's just one of those things that you don't realize at the time. So my advice is, if you're pregnant or if you think you're being pregnant, enjoy the time beforehand, enjoy the preparation. It is exciting. And afterwards, there are a few more balls to juggle. Getting your childcare arrangements sorted out. Are you going to have an au pair? Are you going to use in-laws, family? What are those arrangements going to look like? Getting that set up, getting that communicated adequately, and seeing what that interaction will be like with your boss. And the last one is around planning your return to work. So I wish I knew that I could plan, or how important it was to plan some elements of the return to work process. So my key tips include ensuring that you've discussed with your boss what that return to work looks like. Do you want to come back to the same role? Do you want to try a different department? Do you want to do something maybe that doesn't need as many hours if you're working a shift pattern before, doing 12-hour days, and now that's just not practical given that you need to do drop-offs? And, some centres, some childcare centres don't open until 6:30. So if you have got a 6 o'clock start time, then that's not something that's going to work well. So understanding what that looks like for yourself and getting that communicated and planned out with your boss beforehand. Another example is around, when do you want to come back? Is it going to be on a full-time arrangement, part-time? Which days were you thinking? And that can also be written into your plan. We have keeping in touch days in Australia, which are essentially a government policy which allocates 10 days to each employee in your unpaid part of your maternity leave, so really close to when you're looking to come back, to keep in touch, to get your finger back on the pulse, understand what is happening in the workplace. Has there been any restructures? Is there a new boss in your seat, in your old boss's seat? And essentially understand what you're coming back to, what your work package will look like. And even if there's some training or some conferences happening at the time of your return, you could also use your keeping in touch days to get involved on this side of the fence. So those are key important things. Remember, you need to own your pregnancy journey. You need to shape how it proceeds. Unfortunately, there is a common bias still in the industry around women who have had their babies or who are considering families, and their desire to perhaps return to work, their desire to continue to seek leadership roles or be ambitious or driven in their career. There is a notion that you would prefer to, now focus on home, or even some bosses may want to force that onto you, like, oh, look, we're thinking that you may not be able to do this project because you're now a mother. And so it's important that you shape the narrative, you make that how you see that to be, and that's important for you to address. I hope these tips have helped you navigate your journey to going into motherhood and your pregnancy journey. So feel free to add any comments in the chat below. Contact me on brenda.denbeston.com or find me on socials, that Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook under Brenda Denbeston. I look forward to hearing from you again soon. Bye.